It's December 15, 2017. A real estate agent arrives at a large home on Old Colony Road in Toronto's North York neighbourhood. She has a showing scheduled. The Shermans are selling this house. They've already bought their dream home nearby and are moving on. She lets herself in. She finds them in the basement pool area. Barry Sherman, 75 years old, founder of Apotex, Canada's largest generic pharmaceutical company, a man worth an estimated $4.7 billion. And Honey Sherman, 70, his wife of 50 years, philanthropist, community leader, the woman their children described as the engine of the family. They are seated side by side, legs outstretched, belts looped around their necks, attached to the pool railing. The real estate agent calls 911. They have been dead for approximately 2 days. For 2 days, the founder of one of the most powerful pharmaceutical companies in the world and his wife sat in their basement and nobody came. No family, no staff, no friends who grew concerned. No signs of forced entry. No signs of robbery. Just the two of them. And whoever did this. And 2 days of silence. Barry Sherman was not a man who inspired uncomplicated feelings. He was a genius, a pharmaceutical innovator who built Apotex from nothing into a global generic drug empire, fighting patent battles against the world's largest pharmaceutical corporations and winning. He made cheap medications available to millions of people. He also made billions of dollars doing it. He was litigious, combative, and relentless. His son Jonathan told police that his parents were complicated people and that there were people out there who would have a grudge against them and a reason to hurt them. Barry Sherman had lawsuits pending in multiple jurisdictions at the time of his death. He had relatives who had sued him for decades over an inheritance dispute that had never been resolved. He was also, by every account from people who knew him, completely devoted to Honey. Honey Sherman was 70 years old and described by everyone who knew her as the person who made the world work around Barry. She was a philanthropist, a community organizer, a mother of 4, and the social architect of the Sherman family's public life. She had planned and executed some of the most significant charitable fundraising events in Canadian history. She was, in the language of those who loved her, irreplaceable. They were married for 50 years. They were planning to move to a new home together. They were selling Old Colony Road and starting something new. Instead, they were found side by side in the basement. The initial police response to the Sherman murders produced one of the most consequential investigative failures in Canadian true crime history. Within 24 hours of the bodies being discovered, the Toronto Police Service held a press conference and announced that the deaths appeared to be a murder-suicide. A detective stated publicly that there was no evidence of foul play and that the working theory was that Barry had killed Honey and then himself. The Sherman family rejected this conclusion immediately and hired their own private investigative team and a private pathologist. The family's private pathologist conducted an independent autopsy and concluded emphatically that both deaths were homicides, that neither death was consistent with suicide, and that both Barry and Honey had been killed by a third party. The Toronto Police Service reversed its position. The case was reclassified as a double homicide. The damage done by the initial public murder-suicide declaration was significant and irreversible. The scene had been released to the family before it was fully processed as a homicide crime scene. Evidence that might have existed was compromised. And the initial framing, that Barry killed Honey, had been broadcast internationally before it was retracted. The family has never forgiven that failure. 4 years into the investigation, Toronto police released approximately 20 seconds of surveillance footage showing a person in dark clothing walking on a snowy sidewalk outside the Sherman residence on the night of December 13, 2017, the night police believe the Shermans were killed. Of all the people seen on video footage seized from nearby security cameras that night, this person was the only one detectives were unable to identify and exclude from the investigation. The timing of this individual's appearance is in line with when we believe the murders took place. Based on this evidence, we're classifying this individual as a suspect. The video is approximately 20 seconds long. The figure is dressed in dark clothing. They walk toward the Sherman property and then disappear from camera range. They have never been identified. That surveillance figure remains the closest thing to a named suspect in this investigation. In September 2022, Toronto homicide detectives executed a new search warrant at an undisclosed location and obtained 14,801 electronic files of previously unseen material. The content of these files remains sealed. Only heavily redacted portions have been made available to the public. In the warrant, police wrote that they were pursuing documents and data that would further implicate or exonerate current persons of interest in this investigation and determine if any persons had, or did not have, a motive to kill Bernard and Honey Sherman. Persons of interest, plural. 7 years after the murders, Toronto police maintain that the investigation is active and ongoing, that investigative steps are being taken every day. No arrest has ever been made. The Sherman estate, worth billions, has been the subject of its own legal battles. The Supreme Court of Canada ordered court files related to the estate unsealed after a challenge citing public interest. Grave physical safety risks. In a case with no arrest. In a case where 14,801 files remain sealed. In a case where a billionaire and his wife were found hanging from their own pool railing with no signs of forced entry. Their killer has never been charged. The figure on the surveillance footage has never been identified. And somewhere in 14,801 sealed electronic files, investigators believe the answer may exist. Understanding what the behavioral evidence tells us requires working through each element that should exist but doesn't. Begin with the absence of forced entry. No signs of forced entry were found at the Sherman residence. In targeted homicides of wealthy individuals in secured properties, the absence of forced entry means one of three things. The victims admitted their killer voluntarily. The killer had a key or access code, or the killer was already inside when the victims arrived. All three possibilities have specific behavioral implications. A killer admitted voluntarily is someone the victims knew and trusted, or someone who presented as a known entity, a service provider, a visitor with a plausible reason for being there. The Sherman home was actively listed for sale. Real estate agents, inspectors, and potential buyers had been coming and going. The cover of a real estate-related visit would explain access without forced entry in a way that required minimal relationship with the victims. The staging of the bodies is the most behaviorally significant element of the entire crime scene. Barry and Honey were found seated side by side, legs outstretched, with belts looped around their necks attached to the pool railing. This is not a position that occurs naturally in a struggle. It is a position that requires deliberate arrangement after death. Both victims placed in parallel postures, in a specific location, in a specific way. That arrangement takes time. That arrangement requires confidence. That arrangement is the work of someone who felt completely in control of the environment after the killings were complete. Behavioral analysts call this organized crime scene staging, the deliberate manipulation of a crime scene to create a specific impression. The initial impression it created was murder-suicide. Whether that was the intention of the staging is a question investigators have been working through for 7 years. The profile that emerges from the behavioral evidence is specific. This was a planned operation. The killer, or killers, arrived at the Sherman property with the means of restraint and death already prepared. They gained entry without force. They controlled 2 adults, one of whom was a physically large and assertive man, well enough to stage the scene afterward. They left no forensic evidence other than the figure on the surveillance footage. They have remained silent for 7 years. That behavioral profile is inconsistent with a crime of passion, a robbery gone wrong, or an opportunistic attack. It is consistent with a professional or semi-professional targeted killing, someone paid or motivated to execute a specific outcome and capable of doing so without leaving the physical traces that typically define homicide crime scenes. Jonathan Sherman told police his parents were complicated people with enemies. Barry Sherman had pending litigation in multiple jurisdictions. He had relatives who had been suing him for decades. He had competitors who had fought patent battles against him for years. He had a pharmaceutical empire worth billions and the legal history to match. Toronto police maintain that investigative steps are being taken every day. The figure in the dark clothing on the snowy sidewalk has never been identified. Barry was 75, Honey was 70. They had been married for 50 years. They were selling their house and moving somewhere new together. They were found 2 days after they died. Their killer has never been charged. The case is still open.